My name is Maryam Abdullahi. Before I start, I want to send a special thanks to the student of Esteem Learning Center, right? For waking up the crowd for me. Okay, so because of the time factor, I think I will start before she gets to project. Well, my presentation, when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is a very short presentation. What causes cancer? Nobody knows. So I'll just come and say, well, I don't know, and go back and sit down. Because Dr. Omar already told us that we really don't know the cause of cancer. In majority of cases, there are some very few that we do know, but in majority of cases we don't know. So most patients, especially those that are afflicted, always ask us, how come I have cancer? What caused this my cancer? It's a very difficult question to answer because the cause of cancer is really not known. For us to really understand the process of development of cancer, I want to assume that nobody in this hall has any knowledge of science. And I'm going to go back to the basics for us to understand the process of development. But it's going to be very brief. So the definition of cancer is a disease resulting from uncontrolled growth and the division of abnormal cells. But then what are these cells? Is there a pointer, please? Okay, so the picture of normal cells up there shows some circular structures that divide in an orderly fashion. When we look at the cancer cells, we see that they are dividing, multiply. When I say division, it means that they are multiplying and growing in a very disorderly manner, in a very chaotic manner. Next. So, like I said, this cell forms the basic unit of every living human being. Every living thing in the world, Well, I'm talking about cancer in human beings, so I'm going to talk about the structure and organization of the human body. We have all eaten chicken, and we know that the chicken has lungs, heart, skin, bone, muscle, everything. So all of these structures are made up of cells. The easiest way to understand the cell, next slide, please, is to think of it like an egg. Actually, an unfertilized egg is a cell. So the cell has a structure that we call the nucleus generally, the cell membrane, and what we call the cytoplasm. The beginning of cancer lies in this part called the nucleus. That is the middle part there. Thank you. Thank you very much for this. So this middle part is the nucleus. It contains something we call the nucleolus, which contains the chromosomes. The chromosomes contain the hereditary, all the regulatory information in the body. They regulate every single thing from our skin color to our voice, to our height, to how our cells divide. Next slide. Okay. This chromosome further contains something we call the DNA. Full meaning is deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, so the basic point I was trying to make here is that the cell is the beginning of every cancer. It has a structure in it that is not moving here. Oh, okay. It has a structure in it. Your next slide. That determines how the cell divides and multiplies. And when there's any abnormality in this structure, it can divide abnormally. The reason why we say that we don't know the cause actually is because we don't know exactly what makes this division abnormal in some people, while in others, the division is normal. Next slide, please. So when there is, just back again to the first slide, when there is an abnormal division, the cancer cells multiply rapidly. They don't multiply with any form of structure or order. And then before you know it, they become what we see outside as the tumor, that is a swelling. Next slide, please. Now, what research has found out is some people took their time to look at this. Who are these people that developed cancer? Is there anything in their lifestyle, in their genetics, in their behaviors that is different from those that don't develop cancer? So that is where we came up with the concept of risk factors. There are some risk factors that are what we call modifiable, those that you can influence, those that before you develop cancer, you can take up the habit, healthy habits and not develop cancer in the future. So those risk factors that have been linked to causing cancer include The most common one, smoking. I must mention here that every type of cancer has its own set of risk factors. Not all are common to all, but a majority of these risk factors are common to most of the cancers that we know. So smoking, alcohol, obesity, poor diet, unprotected sex, excessive sun exposure, sedentary lifestyle, all these have been associated with development of cancer in the future. Why do we call them modifiable? You can stop smoking. You can stop taking alcohol. You can work on your weight. I can work on my weight and reduce it. Sedentary lifestyle, even if you work in the office for how many minutes, you can take that break of 30 minutes to take a walk and come back. Poor diet, you can decide to go green. You can decide to make sure that everything in your fridge is green. Unprotected sexual intercourse, alhamdulillah, we are Muslims. This is definitely not part of our lifestyle, even the alcohol too. Excessive sun exposure, those people, this is especially important in albinos. They can decide to cover themselves during the day, wear long clothing, use their umbrella during the day to prevent development of cancer in the future. Next slide, please. Well, there are those factors that are not modifiable. For some people, they have the genes that make them tend to develop cancer in the future. It doesn't mean that they must develop cancer. So people who have a mother or a sister or any relative that has had cancer have an increased risk of having it. It doesn't mean that just because your mother or your sister or your aunt has had cancer, you must develop it. It just means that you are at higher risk. But you can't change that fact. That is why we call them non-modifiable. Your ethnicity, some cancers are commoner in some particular ethnic groups than others. Example, even the cervical cancer we have been talking about so much is definitely commoner in the northern part of the region of the country than in other parts of the country. Family history, I've mentioned that some cancers are commoner in particular race, age. We've been talking about prostate cancer. Prostate cancer tends to develop later at an advanced age. Next slide, please. Well, we can't finish this presentation without talking about cervical cancer. We just came out of January, which is the Cervical Cancer Awareness Month. The reason why I brought up cervical cancer here, it is one of those malignancies. When I say malignancy, I mean cancer, that the cause has been identified. One of those malignancies that has features of early presentation. Early presentation even before it becomes cancer. One of those malignancies that even when it becomes cancer, it can be treated fully. One of those malignancies that has vaccines available to prevent that virus from even setting its foot in the cervix in the first place. So the question now is, if we have all these things, we know the cause of cervical cancer, we can screen for it, we know the symptoms, why are we still suffering from cervical cancer? I think it's our collective responsibility, the Muslim Ummah, to make sure that cervical cancer is eradicated from the northern part of the region where it has the highest prevalence and eradicated from the world collectively. Next slide, please. In conclusion, although most cancers, majority of the cancers, the cause remain unknown, we definitely have risk factors. And those risk factors, most of them are things that we can do something about. So it's our responsibility to protect ourselves from cancer.